K9 and Sarah Jane. Feels like I haven't seen them in decades, or years, or a couple of months. It kind of depends. Time gets weird on this treadmill. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. I am old and out of shape, and this treadmill is barely helping me hold back the tide. I am wiped out. And speaking of feeling old and out of shape, Sarah Jane Smith showed up in today's story, feeling old and left behind, and leaves the story completely rekindled and re-energized, and it's absolutely wonderful. There's so many great things about this story. And you have to look at it through the context of when it aired. At the point the school reunion premiered in 2006, it had been 23 years since Sarah Jane Smith had last appeared. She was in The Five Doctors, and of course she had the potential spin-off show K9 and Company that got a pilot and then never went anywhere for various, mostly political reasons. But Elizabeth Sladen got back into Doctor Who actually a couple years prior to this with Big Finish Audio and doing a range of adventures. And when Russell T Davies approached her to come back on the show, she readily agreed. More importantly, he also brought back John Leeson to voice K9 again, and no one else could really do it properly. So having the two of them back in the new series cemented the fact that this series was not a reboot, it was an actual continuation of the classic series. And that seems obvious to say now. But up until the point that this particular story appeared, there was actually still some small debate on whether or not that was true. And this story answered that question emphatically. Elizabeth Sladen is just so amazing. She is the quintessential Doctor Who companion. Her run as a companion is uncompared in the classic era, and I am so happy for her that she was able to come back and enjoy another round of success, not only with this story, but then with the upcoming Sarah Jane adventures. And I'm still gutted at her sudden passing several years ago. It was a cruel, cruel loss, and there's not much else I can say on that point. So one interesting and sort of tragic note to this story. This story was actually banned and taken out of syndication in Australia because of an event that happened not long after the story aired. See, at the climax of the story, the school where the whole thing takes place gets blown up. And one of the students is instrumental in helping that happen and defeating the Krillitane. And so there's a triumphant scene with the other students cheering him on and saying that so-and-so blew up the school, and they're all shouting hooray. Well, not long after this story aired in Australia, a student actually did blow up a school. And because of that ending and how it played out, the Australian broadcasters decided that it was in poor taste and a bad idea to air this story in future repeats. I don't know if that's been subsequently lifted, but for a good long time, this story was just not broadcast in Australia. I guess the only other comment I have on this story is that it does feature Anthony Stewart Head as the guest villain of the week, who at the time was most well known as playing Giles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I don't even want to get into the current Joss Whedon controversy or any of that. But I will say that Anthony Stewart Head was certainly very good in the role, but there was a particular line of dialogue that was clearly put in as a nod to Buffy, and it doesn't play well, and I really wish they kind of hadn't. He says something along the lines of, ignore the shooty dog thing, which is so clearly a Buffy piece of dialogue, and it just doesn't work. And like I say, I wish they hadn't done it. But that's really the only moment of the show I dislike. So much of the story, kind of like the first half of the farting aliens from Raxacoricofallapatorius story, is about what happens to the people left behind by the Doctor. With Aliens of London, it was Rose returning, having been gone for a year, and seeing what her absence did to her mother and Mickey and everyone else around it. In this story, it's all about how Sarah Jane Smith reacted to being left behind in Croydon. Well, actually, not even Croydon. It turned out she was left behind in Scotland, many hundreds of miles away from home. But in any case, so much of the story is dealing with, from her perspective, what it was like to be left behind by the Doctor, and from the Doctor's perspective, what it's like to continue living and living and living as his friends and companions age around him. And that's the sort of conflict that never ever would have come up in the classic series at all. And it's so nice for the writers to be able to explore those kind of deeper themes in the modern series. It's still early days for David Tennant, but this story is another pivotal moment in cementing his characterization of the kind of lonely god version of the Doctor. And it's really nice to see. So anyway, School Reunion, great story, thoroughly enjoyed it this morning. And now I'm going to go cool off and get to work. Tomorrow is one of my all-time favorites, one of the great stories of the modern era, The Girl in the Fireplace, and I am so psyched to get there. I'll see you tomorrow.